a small house on the outskirts of Edmond, South Carolina. On a summer night in 1986, a 4-year-old girl named Jessica Gutierrez vanished from her bed. Her sister, Rebecca, only 6 years old, woke up in the middle of the night and saw a terrifying figure, a man with a beard and a witch hat, gently carrying a sleeping Jessica out of the room. Frightened, Rebecca pulled the blanket over her head, thinking it was just a strange dream. But the next morning, Jessica was gone. The front door was wide open, the window screen removed, and a 38-year mystery began. This is not the only story. From small American towns, 5 cases of disappearances and murders have shaken communities, leaving behind strange clues and unanswered questions: a missing pair of lavender shoes, a dismantled staircase light bulb, a purse found far from a body, and letters from someone claiming to be the killer. These stories are not just mysteries. They are reminders of the evil that can lurk in the places we think are safest. Join me as we step into the world of these cases, starting with Jessica's home in Edmond, a small town nestled among South Carolina's endless fields. In 1986, this was a place where people left their doors unlocked, where children played in yards without fear. But that night, that peace was shattered. Jessica, the youngest in her family, lived with her mother, Debbie, and 3 siblings. Debbie was a single mother, working tirelessly to raise her 4 children after a divorce. Despite hardships, their family was close-knit, with evenings spent together over dinner being precious. Jessica, with her radiant smile, often played in the yard with her siblings while Debbie busied herself with household chores. But on that fateful night, everything changed. Jessica didn't sleep with her mother as usual because her brother had an earache. Instead, she slept with Rebecca on a small bed in a dimly lit room, with only the faint glow of a nightlight. Jessica's story is just one of 5 mysteries we'll explore. In Marietta, Georgia, in 1972, Debbie Lynn Randall, a 9-year-old who loved basketball and dolls, vanished after leaving a laundromat just a few hundred yards from home. In Calumet, Illinois, in 1966, Karen Snyder, an 18-year-old mother, was stabbed 124 times in her own home, leaving her 2-month-old daughter in her crib. In Lawrence, Massachusetts, in 1988, Melissa Tremblay, an 11-year-old who loved fashion and singing, disappeared while playing near a bar. Her body later found among abandoned train cars. And in Seattle, Washington, in 1987, a young couple, Tanya Van Kuylenborg and Jay Cook, vanished on a trip to a strange city, leaving behind a blood-soaked van and letters from someone claiming to be the killer. Each case happened in small towns where communities believed evil only existed elsewhere. But the truth was far crueler. So, what happened to these people? Were they victims of random abductors? Or did evil come from someone they knew? Let's consider some initial theories. First, these could be random abductions, a stranger exploiting Jessica's innocence, Debbie's solitude, or Melissa's vulnerability, or the trust of Tanya and Jay on a long road trip. This theory holds because the victims were in vulnerable positions: a girl sleeping in an unlocked room, a child walking to the laundromat alone, or a couple stopping in an unfamiliar place. But it doesn't explain why the killer left strange clues, like the witch hat or the dismantled light bulb. Second theory: revenge, or personal motives. In Karen's case, the killer could be someone she knew, as foreign blood in the house matched a family friend. But if it's personal, why do the other cases seem random? A third theory: a serial killer. The cases span decades, with chilling brutality, like Karen's 124 stab wounds or Debbie's body dragged through a forest. But there's no clear evidence linking them. Finally, a supernatural theory just to give you chills. Could Jessica's witch hat man be something not of this world? Of course. A 6-year-old's account might just be confusion, but it still makes you wonder. Personally, I think these cases expose a terrifying truth. Evil doesn't need to come from a stranger. It could be a neighbor, a friend, or even someone who worked in your home. These small towns, with their naive belief in safety, became hunting grounds for predators. And what haunts me most is how the clues of fingerprint, a purse, a letter sat there for decades, as if waiting for someone patient enough to decode them, to understand why these people vanished and what those strange clues mean. We need to go back to their final moments, where the mysteries began. On the night of June 5th, 1986, in the small house in Edmond, South Carolina, Jessica Gutierrez was sleeping soundly next to her sister Rebecca. The room was dark, with only the faint light of a small night light and the soft hum of a fan. Debbie, Jessica's mother, had locked the front door as she did every night, put her son with the earache to sleep with her, and let Jessica sleep with her sisters. No one expected that night would be the last, and they saw the 4-year-old. The next morning, around 9 Rebecca walked into her mother's room, innocently asking Debbie to make breakfast. But when Debbie stepped out, she immediately sensed something was wrong. The front door, always carefully locked, was wide open. The dog, usually in the yard, was running around the house. A curtain rod lay under the back window, and the screen had been removed. Debbie ran to her children's room, her heart pounding. But Jessica was gone, on the floor. A few papers were scattered, as if someone had left in a hurry. Debbie asked Rebecca, "Where's your sister?" The 6-year-old replied with a trembling voice, "She's gone. A man with a beard and a witch hat took her." Rebecca's story was initially dismissed by Debbie as childish imagination. But as she searched the house, yard, and neighborhood with no sign of Jessica, fear began to choke her. Rebecca, under her mother's pressure, shared more details that night. She woke up and saw a man standing by the bed. He had a beard and wore a strange hat she thought was a witch hat, like in cartoons. He unplugged the fan and nightlight, then gently picked up Jessica, still fast asleep, and left the room, terrified. Rebecca hid under the blanket and fell back asleep, not telling her mother. Debbie immediately called the police. They found a fingerprint on the outside of the window, a cigarette pack, and some stubs nearby. But the strangest clue was Rebecca's story. A man with a witch hat. Was it a child's confusion, or a detail that would lead to the truth? Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away in Marietta, Georgia. On January 13th, 1972, Debbie Lynn Randall, 9 years old, left home to go to a laundromat just a few hundred yards away. She wore a lavender dress and matching shoes, a Christmas gift she loved. Debbie was used to this errand, often going with her brother. But that day he was sick, so she went alone. She put the clothes in the washer, then left to call her family to pick them up. But Debbie never returned. When her mother arrived at the laundromat, the staff said Debbie had left long ago. Nearby, in the parking lot, her mother found spilled detergent next to a car, and on the car door were clear fingerprints, lower than the handle, as if someone had touched it while crouching. Sandra, a 12-year-old girl, later said she saw a man pull Debbie into a black truck. She screamed, but he drove off 2 weeks later. On January 29th, Debbie's body was found in a forest a few miles from home, strangled and sexually assaulted. Her clothes had distinctive clay from 2 nearby quarries, and a single foreign hair, the only clue to the killer. In Calumet, Illinois, on November 12, 1966, Karen Snyder, 18, was home with her 2-month-old daughter, Paula, while her husband, Paul, worked the night shift. Between 4 and 6 p.m., someone entered the house. When Paul returned at 11 p.m., he found the door unlocked, the porch light off, and the curtains drawn, all unusual. In the living room, Paula was still asleep in her crib, next to a blaring TV, but when Paul went to the bedroom, he faced a horrific scene. Karen lay on the floor, blood pooling around her, with 124 stab wounds, mostly to her chest. The room was in disarray, the phone disconnected, and the staircase light bulb had been removed. Lying on the floor, police found foreign blood throughout the house. From the living room to the stairs to the bedroom, a basement window was broken, with blood on the glass, and the back door showed pry marks. In the bathroom, a pile of blood-soaked clothes pants, towels, sheets was stuffed in the tub. Karen's green purse, containing $50 and a nightlight, were missing. The killer had clearly stayed in the house for a while. But why remove the light bulb, and why leave so much blood? In Lawrence, Massachusetts, on September 11, 1988, Melissa Tremblay, 11, was playing near a bar where her mother, Jeanette, was meeting her boyfriend. Melissa often played outside, familiar with the area. She stopped by the bar to grab popcorn, saying she'd be back. But she never returned. By 4 p.m., Jeanette grew worried, searching with her boyfriend, but to no avail. By 9 p.m., she called the police. The next day, a railroad worker found Melissa's body between 2 abandoned train cars at an old depot, a few hundred yards from the bar. She had been stabbed 3 times fatally, and one leg was severed by a train. But oddly, her purse, containing her Boys and Girls Club card, was found 20 yards away, near a footprint and a drop of blood. A witness saw Melissa talking to a man near a brown van, but no one confirmed his identity. Did the killer intentionally place her body on the tracks to stage an accident? Finally, too, on November 18, 1987, Tanya Van Kuylenborg, 18, and Jay Cook, 20, left Victoria, Canada, for Seattle to buy a part for Jay's family business. They traveled in a van, planning to sleep in it to save money. But they never reached the store in Seattle. 5 days later, on November 24th, Tanya's body was found under a tree in a forest, 90 miles north of Seattle. She had been shot in the head, her hands tied with zip ties, her clothes disheveled. 2 days later, Jay's body was found near a bridge, a few dozen miles from Seattle, with signs of strangulation and multiple bruises. Their van was found near a bar in Bellingham, 18 miles from Tanya's body. Inside was chaos, broken belongings, blood everywhere, and strange clues: rubber gloves, a box of bullets, zip ties like those used on Tanya, and a receipt showing their route. Tanya's camera, her constant companion, was missing. And then, weeks later, their families began receiving letters from someone claiming to be the killer, mocking their pain. Were these letters from the real murderer, or just a sick prank? The police jumped into action, but each case faced challenges. In Jessica's case, they found the fingerprint on the window and the cigarette pack, but they didn't match anyone in the FBI database. They suspected Debbie's abusive ex-boyfriend, but there was no evidence. Rebecca stuck to her story about the witch hat man, but she didn't see his face clearly. The FBI joined, and planes were used to search. But Jessica remained missing. In Debbie's case, 4,000 people joined the search, setting a Georgia record. The fingerprints on the car, the clay on her clothes, and the foreign hair led police to nearby quarries. But no one was arrested. Karen's case initially pointed to Paul, her husband. The foreign blood, pry marks, and removed light bulbs suggested a break-in. But police thought it might be staged. James Barbier, Paul's friend, had suspicious injuries that night. But there wasn't enough evidence to arrest him. With Melissa, police searched the train yard and analyzed DNA under her nails. But it was only partial, not enough to match. A witness mentioned a brown van, but it was never found. And with Tanya and Jay, the foreign blood in the van, zip ties, and killer's letters suggested a serial killer. The fingerprints on the van didn't match anyone, and the missing camera deepened the mystery. What are the theories for these cases, Em? The killer was a random abductor, exploiting the victim's vulnerability. Jessica sleeping in an unlocked house, Debbie walking alone, Tanya and Jay stopping in a strange place. 2. Personal motives like James being jealous of Karen or Debbie's ex seeking revenge. 3. A serial killer, given the brutality and sophistication of the crimes. 4. The killer staged the scenes like Melissa's body on the tracks or the broken window at Karen's house. Personally, I think the delays in investigation, especially ignoring clues like fingerprints or foreign blood, let the killers walk free too long. These towns trusted in their safety, and that cost them dearly. These strange clues, the witch hat, the removed light bulb. The killer's letters led police on challenging investigations, but also revealed the truth about those left behind. The families torn apart by grief. The police in Edmond, South Carolina, faced a tough mystery. The fingerprint on Jessica Gutierrez's window, the cigarette pack in the yard, and Rebecca's story of the witch hat man were the first pieces. They searched the house thoroughly, placed a recorder on Debbie's phone, hoping the kidnapper would call for ransom. But no call came. Debbie, in a panic, pointed to her abusive ex-boyfriend, whom she'd broken up with days earlier. She believed he might have taken Jessica for revenge, but when police questioned him, he denied everything, and there was no evidence against him. Jessica's father, living in another state, was also checked but was uninvolved. The window fingerprint was sent to the FBI but matched no one in their database. Police searched fields, forests, and rivers near the house, with FBI and aerial support, but found no trace of Jessica. 2 days after the disappearance, Debbie called the sheriff, begging for the search to continue over the weekend. The conversation grew tense. The sheriff, angry, threatened to pull the search team and forget this case. Debbie recorded the call, and that tape became evidence of the police's incompetence. 10 weeks later, a breakthrough came. Thomas McDowell, 27, was arrested for burglary and assault in North Carolina. His fingerprint matched the one on Jessica's window. Debbie was shocked to learn of Thomas. He had worked at her house months earlier, building a shed and fixing the porch roof. He had a beard and always wore a cowboy hat, making Debbie wonder if Rebecca mistook it for a witch hat. But the police refused to prosecute. The fingerprint, though fresh, could be explained by his prior work. And they had no body. Debbie said she often cleaned the windows because the kids left dirty handprints. So the fingerprint couldn't be from 6 months ago. She also recalled Thomas seeing her climb through the window when locked out, possibly inspiring his entry method. But the police still didn't act. In 1987, Thomas's cellmate reported that he confessed to kidnapping and killing Jessica after she bit him. He even offered to plead guilty if spared prosecution, but the police declined. Debbie, desperate, investigated herself, finding fabric in Thomas's car matching Jessica's pajamas. But the police dismissed it. It wasn't until 2024 when new Sheriff Jay Kuhn reopened the case with 50 FBI agents that Thomas was convicted 38 years later in Marietta, Georgia. Debbie Randall's case faced similar hurdles. The search with 4,000 people was the largest in state history, but Debbie wasn't found until her body appeared in the forest. The clay on her clothes pointed to 2 quarries, but no one was arrested. The car fingerprints didn't match anyone. The hair on Debbie's body was only identified as belonging to a man aged 18 to 30, as DNA didn't exist in 1972. It wasn't until 2023 that genealogy confirmed the killer was William Rose, a neighbor who died by suicide in 1974, never suspected before. Karen Snyder's case in Calumet, Illinois, was also riddled with failures. Paul, her husband, was the first suspect, but the foreign blood didn't match him. James Barbier, Paul's friend, had injuries on his hand and face that night, and the blood in the house matched his blood type. But blurry fingerprints and no DNA led police to release him. It wasn't until 2024, when DNA on Karen's dress matched James, that he confessed 58 years later. Melissa Tremblay's case in Lawrence, Massachusetts, had similar issues. The DNA under her nails was partial, not enough to match. A 2013 witness mentioned a man named Mike, but the timeline conflicted. Marvin McClendon, the main suspect, was arrested in 2022 via familial DNA. But the trial ended in a hung jury, and the case remains unresolved. Tanya and Jay's case was an exception. In 2018, genealogy identified William Talbot through DNA from blood and semen in the van. The van's fingerprints also matched him, and he was convicted in 2019. But the letters from the supposed killer were a sick prank by an unrelated person, misdirecting the investigation for decades. The pain of the families in these cases is immeasurable. Debbie, Jessica's mother, lived in helplessness, investigating on her own and publicly criticizing the police. In 2007, she shared the sheriff's recording, exposing corruption. Both the sheriff and prosecutor were later arrested for unrelated crimes. Debbie Randall's mother moved away, unable to bear the memories. Sandra, the 12-year-old witness, lived with guilt for not stopping the abduction. Paula, Karen's daughter, grew up without the truth, only receiving the greatest call in 2024 when James was caught. Jeanette, Melissa's mother, was criticized by the media for letting her daughter play alone and died in 2015 without knowing the killer. Tanya and Jay's parents hired helicopters and did media campaigns, but waited 30 years for justice. The media played a big role, but not always positively. A 1990 TV show about Jessica and a 2010 one about Tanya generated tips, but solved nothing immediately. The media criticized Jeanette in Melissa's case, fueling stereotypes about parental responsibility. In Debbie's case, South Carolina's first victim age progression sketch in 1991 drew attention but didn't find her. These cases also left lasting impacts. Jessica's case exposed police corruption. Debbie's raised child safety awareness. Tanya's advanced genealogy and investigations. But they also spread fear. No one is truly safe, even in their own home. While police grappled with these clues, big questions remain. Why wasn't Thomas arrested sooner? Where is Tanya's camera? And is Marvin really Melissa's killer? These mysteries aren't just about clues. They're stories of people, hope, and what we still don't understand. After decades, some cases found justice, but the cost was immense. Jessica Gutierrez now has justice, with Thomas McDowell convicted in 2024, but Debbie, her mother, can't find peace knowing he could have been caught 38 years earlier. Jessica's body remains unfound, and Debbie and the new sheriff continue searching. Though hope is slim, Debbie Randall's killer was identified as William Rose in 2023, but he died in 1974, leaving her family with emptiness. Karen Snyder finally got justice in 2024 when James Barbier confessed. But Paula, her daughter, lived a lifetime with the void of a mother she never knew. Melissa Tremblay's case remains unresolved, with Marvin McClendon awaiting retrial in 2024, and he may not live to see a verdict. Only Tanya and Jay's case was clearly resolved, with William Talbot convicted in 2019, but questions about his other crimes linger. The unanswered questions make these cases haunting. What was the witch hat man just Thomas's cowboy hat? Or a deeper mystery in a child's mind, why did James remove the light bulb at Karen's house to hide? Or for some sick reason, was Melissa's purse found 20 yards from her body, deliberately staged? And Tanya's camera, does it hold the killer's final image, the mocking letters to the families? Though a prank, left scars that won't fade. Personally, I think these cases aren't just about crime, they're warnings about how easily we miss danger signs. These small towns, with their belief in safety, became shadows for evil to hide. And the justice system's delays, from ignoring fingerprints to waiting for DNA technology, let killers walk free too long. These families, Debbie, Paula, Sandra, Melvin, lived with indescribable pain. They didn't just lose loved ones, they lost faith in the world around them. But their stories also testify to resilience. Debbie never gave up, even when police turned away. Melvin, Debbie Randall's brother, stood at a 2023 press conference, thanking those who didn't forget his sister. And Paula, though raised in darkness, found light when her mother's killer was caught. I'll leave you with this question. What do you think about these strange clues? Was Jessica's witch hat just a mistake? Or something deeper? Is Marvin McClendon really Melissa's killer? Or are we missing another culprit? And if you have a similar mystery story, share it in the comments. These cases remind us that the truth, though hard to find, is always worth pursuing. Thanks for joining me on this journey. Please like, subscribe, and see you in the next episode, where we'll uncover more mysteries waiting to be revealed.